I would like to welcome everyone today to this webinar on the SEC's 2026 exam priorities, what to know and how to prepare. I'm the editor-in-chief of Wealth Solutions Report, Julius Buchanan, and I have with me Essential Edge's leadership, Todd Spillane, who's president, and Sander Ressler, who's managing director and founder. Todd has spent 3 decades in the industry focusing on RIA compliance. He's held various roles of leadership, including Chief Compliance Officer, General Counsel, and Chief Operating Officer at firms such as AIG, CIBC, and Invesco. Sander has focused much of his career on broker-dealers and FINRA, and he has, as I said, he is the founder of Essential Edge, and he has worked at companies such as American Express, AIG, ING, SocGen, and American General Life. And today we have a couple of icons I'd like to point out to everybody on the side of the screen. You should see them. A couple of icons that will be very important as we go along. One has a question mark on it, and so when we talk about Q&As, click on that question mark, and then you'll be able to submit a question for our speakers today. Just below that, there's another icon that looks like a chart. That is going to be for polling. So when you click on that icon, you can see a poll. We're going to have a couple polls very quickly to start. And so when you see when you click on that icon, you'll see the poll and you'll be able to respond. So basically, we want to. Oh, and also to remind you for the Q&A questions, please do feel free to ask throughout. There will be a time for Q&As at the end, and we will run for 40 to 45 minutes. But then at the end, we are saving extra time for Q&As. But on top of that, we're also we ask you if you just like to if you have a question that's on a topic that we're on, you don't have to wait until the end. You can go ahead and put that into the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. So let's go through a couple of polls that will help us just get to know you better, the audience. And so the first of those polls is going to be, you can see there when you click on the polling icon, which category best represents where you're employed. So we've got broker-dealer, RIA, hybrid, and vendor. So we'll give you a second to make your selection there. Okay, looks like we got some responses here. We'll just wait a couple more seconds for everybody to get in all their responses. Okay, well, it looks like we have an audience that is a very broad audience across all these different areas. So the second poll, really quick, is going to also help us understand you better. And that second poll looks at the role that you have. So if everybody looks back at the polls, you'll see the second poll. You may have to scroll. You'll see the question, what is your role? And there's several compliance-centered roles that are given as responses there. But if you have another role, please do select other. And we'll just wait a few seconds there for everyone to get in their responses. So while we're waiting on everybody to get in your responses there, I just want to point out that this is going to be something that is going to be applicable for everybody who's got a role in compliance or other kind of executive role. This is going to be for a broad audience. So we have we have our responses there. So Todd and Sander, shall we?
Yeah, let's get started.
Let's go.
Awesome. So the first area we wanted to talk about is strategy and regulatory climate. So the first question we have is, what's the primary theme of the SEC's 2026 priorities under Chairman Atkins?
I'll jump in. I think you're going to see a bit of a change over maybe the last 8 to 10 years here a little bit. I don't think you'll see the broken windows kind of concept that was flowing through the SEC. And by that, I mean, everything goes to enforcement. Everything's going to be a sanction. I do believe strongly, though, that any serious misdeeds, fraud, deception, lying, cheating, stealing, if you will be certainly up for fairly harsh punishment. I think that we're looking at disclosure. Advisors Act is a disclosure document and statute. So conflicts of interest, right? Liquidity, risk, telling your clients what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, what are you going to charge them, how you're going to do it, right? That's the big theme I think you're going to see from the SEC in 26. And we can talk about more in depth in a few seconds, but that's the highlight, Julius.
Thanks. And let's look at the flip side of that and talk about what the SEC is taking off the table as a high priority this year.
26, clearly T+1 is off. It's done, right? That's over and done with. That's an obvious one. I think the one that surprised me from their statements has been that digital is off the table. The administration is bullish on the crypto industry as a whole. They're not going to stand in the way, which means that's your own perception about whether that's good or bad. But if your firm is going to be transacting in cryptocurrencies for clients, you better make sure you've got your basic blocking and tackling, as we always want to talk about, and that's policies and procedures, ability to monitor, the ability to test, to make sure that you're doing exactly what the client expects, right? And you may need to look at amending your contracts, for example, right? Your investment statements, your investment policies. Documentation is always your friend. So those are the things I think that are really off the table, and it's not a lot. We're always going to end up back at the basic books and records, policies and procedures, all that kind of stuff.
Todd, let me ask you a question. Do you think the SEC is going to continue to put themselves forward as the regulator for cryptocurrency? Are they going to continue to move down that path, or you think they're going to back away from that? And then where do you see the future of the SEC crypto relationship?
I do think they will ultimately become the regulator for crypto. It doesn't fit quite nicely into the legal definition, which is, I think, probably close to about 100 years old at this point in time. But I don't think they want to get into a regulatory conflict between themselves, the CFTC, and other places within the government, and somebody's going to own it. I think they're the natural place for it to be housed. So I do expect to see in 26 later, and 27 even, some more guidance on crypto. It's coming. It's definitely coming. Right? We've got ETFs that are doing crypto at the moment, and I think you'll see more of that for sure.
Okay. Another priority that the SEC mentioned was operational resiliency. So what does a firm need to do to ensure things like vendor oversight, business continuity, change management controls, and the like?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think you named a few of them, but I'm going to turn it around a little bit in my response. It's not only doing your vendor oversight, making sure that everybody can do their job and they've got their BCP and we all have BCP and all that kind of good stuff. But when I think of operational resiliency, what that really means to me is if X vendor goes down, how are we going to be able to do business tomorrow and the next day? And what does that really look like? Um, and that's a thought exercise in my mind, right? There's one that you need to think broadly and widely about all the different component parts, and I will say of what is essential for running your business, right? The movement of money, right? The ability to manage the client's assets within their guidelines, right? And making sure that you can raise capital if you need to, right? So there's a lot of component parts to it all. I think you need to find out, in my mind, think about what's essential for your business. But ops is certainly the key of moving money and making sure that the right platforms and you got redundancies and those kind of things. Um, it's interesting because I would say 5 years ago, this was a brand new term, right? And now it's much more into the lexicon of what bigger firms, but all firms are going to need to have.
And Todd, isn't a large part of that what happens if a vendor changes with your data privacy, with your client data? What happens if
Yeah.
one of the critical parts of your business changes or goes under? What happens to the client data and the privacy requirements of the industry?
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
Yeah, it's obviously a concern, and that's why I think the vendor oversight sounds easy and simplistic, and we have a conversation or we get some information from Microsoft or something like that. But you know, sometimes you have to go a little bit deeper, particularly those that are housing your data and understanding what controls they have in place, what redundancies they have in place, so that you don't lose your data, right? Data breaches are a whole other separate problem to deal with. That's a problem too, clearly, but not really one for this conversation, I would say.
And one of the things that I know you and I see in our business is if you want to change vendors, what
Yes.
kind of capture do they have on your data that's going to allow them to release it to a potential new competitor? And
Well,
sometimes extracting data is very difficult as well.
generally, yeah. So there's a couple different avenues, and I would say when you're onboarding a new client relationship that's going to have some of your data housed there, you need to understand what the exit strategy would be in the event you need to get out. And on some of the stuff that I've dealt with over the past, there are some communications review firms, they own your data and you're going to pay dearly to get it back. And there are other firms that take the completely the opposite view. It's not their data, it's your data. Right? And if you want it back, they'll send it back to you. There may be some transactional costs. Some are on the very low end, some are 5 or 6 figures. So it's part of the onboarding process, I think, to understand what you're getting yourself into, particularly from an exit. Look, I'm a lawyer by training, so the first thing I look at is what are they going to do, blah, blah, blah. What's the exit? What's the exit from this agreement? That's the thing that I focus on a lot.
Okay. Should we move on to our next topic? And we're kind of touching on it there already, technology and cybersecurity. What is the SEC's specific focus on artificial intelligence?
Say it again. What is our position on it?
Yes. What is yes? So what is their focus? What is the SEC's focus on artificial intelligence?
Good question. I think anything that is got AI built into it needs to have a review of the model of what it's intended to do. I think that for simple daily GPT chat questions, drafting a policy, for example, right? They don't care that much. They don't, because it's a tool to start you off, but you better know what you're talking about and revise it. It's a tool. It'll probably give you a good B, okay? But things that are more client-facing, marketing materials, there are programs out there, I work with one, that did a marketing material review. If you're in the compliance department, you need to make sure that you understand what the models are doing, what they're intended to do, making sure that you're doing your testing, your review process to confirm, I'm not going to say ensure because we hate that word, but to confirm that you're getting the expected results. And I think part of the training for those, and I don't really like the word training either, but you need to make sure that the users need to raise anomalies up to the owner of the models, but certainly let you know what the process here is. I'm going to take it a little bit on a different spin here also. Cyber in general, all right? So most compliance professionals are not cybersecurity experts. I do not claim to be one. I don't want to be one. I got enough other roles, but it is on our plate. It absolutely is on our plate. What we need to do is professionals in the compliance world is to make sure that that part of the company has reasonably designed policies and procedures, right? How do we do that? I mean, those are very easy words to say, but how do we do that? I think that one of the key things for our compliance people these days is to really know your internal and some external too, know your internal experts, right? And be able to have an honest and frank conversation with them. What does this policy say? What does it do? And then we treat it just like any other policy, right? It's subject to testing. Did you do what the policy says you did, right? Did we have something that happened that was questionable and we now have a policy how we're going to handle all that? And did we follow it? Or did we just arbitrarily decide to do something different, right? It comes down to, again, the policy, the testing, the books and records, and then making sure that the company follows their own policy. And if there are gaps, that's okay. And then you got to make sure that they get revised on an annual basis. That's, I know that sounds relatively simple, but if you understand those parts of the business, and I can go in depth about that in a second, I think that will help compliance professionals understand their roles, at least as the expectations are put out there by the SEC. So I'll say one more thing, and then I'll take a breath. Sander's smiling. 2004, October 2004, the compliance rule came out. And if you go look at 20647, 38A1, it's really short. It's one of the shortest statutes out there. It doesn't say a lot other than we're responsible for everything. Compliance is our problem. But in order to manage all of those things, and the 38A1 has got more guidance in it, and it's got some very specific things that we are responsible for overseeing from a compliance perspective. You want to make sure those are done if you're managing mutual funds, but I think it's great guidance, right? But going back to my earlier comment, get to know your business partners, learn their business, learn what they do, why they do it, how they do it, so that you can be an effective compliance professional and answer any questions or raise any concerns, right? and be able to review their policies. They're their policies, but you got to make sure they have them. Okay. If you make sure they have them, even though they're may not be as reasonably designed as they could be, that's okay. Nobody's going to jail for that, right? But if you have nothing, now you got a bigger problem.
Yeah. And Todd, if I can jump in for a second.
Good.
Probably over the last 10 years, there hasn't been a greater influx of new vendors in any other area but cybersecurity. I mean, there's a lot of vendors that have come into this industry offering cybersecurity protection. And one of the things, as a firm conducts its due diligence on the vendor, make sure that they're in the financial services industry and they're committed to it. And that's where they're doing their work. Cybersecurity varies from industry to industry. So when you're talking to people, how many broker dealers do you have as clients? How many RIAs do you have as clients? Are you committed to this industry, or are you more of a cybersecurity generalist that may not pay as much attention to the nuances that our industry requires? So I think due diligence is really important, and going with a firm that has knowledge and experience in this industry that a firm can piggyback on for the best protection.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair.
Another question, just following up on the AI part. If a firm uses AI or predictive algorithms for trade execution, client communication, or investment recommendations, what does it look like to say that they've done the documented review of the tool? What is that? What is that product like? The review.
The work product. Again, I think from my perspective, that's, for lack of a better word, doing your due diligence and making sure you've got the documentation. This is what the algorithms are intended to do. This is what they're designed to do. Here's the testing that you've done to make sure that 2 + 2 always equals 4. And if once in a great while it comes out to 4.5, okay, how do we do that? You mentioned BestX. There's lots of tools out there that will help you validate that you're getting best execution, right? But on the investment selection, really hard to do. I mean, that's really, really hard to do. And I worked for a firm that did it well for a while, then not so much after that. I don't know if there are very many using AI for security selection at this point in time. I'm sure there's probably a couple of others, but you better be tracking how well it's doing and the results that you're getting, and then doing a deeper dive to see how is the model being tweaked. Is it a language model, and is it being updated daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly? I mean, there's so many variables there, but at the end of the day, I would expect to see that as something as part of the investment committee, and have someone talking about the model and how it's working and what's not working, and making sure you understand. And at some point, if it's not really working, do you need to shut it down? Do you need to make disclosures? And we go down that rabbit hole. And that was a situation a number of years ago with a big firm in New York, and they found out the model wasn't working the way they designed it, and they didn't do anything about it. And that was extremely problematic. So part of this is regular oversight, understanding the business problem with the regulatory oversight, and then it fits back into our general issue resolution type of situation, right? And goes from there.
Yeah. I work with a lot of companies that do email review and advertising review using AI. And I think, the general premise behind it is AI can do the work. They can do it better. It can do it better. It can do it faster. And we can, hopefully reallocate human resources somewhere else. I just don't think we're there yet. I think the regulatory expectation is we have to do a lot of sampling and a lot of aggressive sampling to make sure that the AI is doing what it's supposed to do. And if you're only sampling a very small portion of the universe of emails or advertising review, and you're not catching where the AI may be failing, the regulators aren't going to have any mercy on you. So what I would say is take some of the human resources that you may be reallocating and put it back into the supervision and the sampling, and make sure you're looking at a great enough group within the universe of what you're supposed to be doing to have a comfort level that AI is doing its job.
Yeah, like Sander, so I've done a lot of work in that area, particularly for marketing material. I will reiterate what I said earlier, and I really do believe this. I think AI is a fantastic tool. It's an amazing tool. It is a tool. It does not replace the human being. I would never, ever endorse a policy that would take a piece of material that went through an AI review process and take it as given and send it out to a client. Not a chance. It's a tool. And the ones that I've seen are designed to highlight where the system thinks there are exceptions for the compliance officer to accept, revise, reject, whatever the right answer there is. It's a tool to find the exceptions. I actually think it's a better overall product design for compliance, because I worry about on the market material, if you've got 1,000 pieces in front of you, you're just going to whip through it and you just mentally fog over and skip paragraphs or two. You have a human risk element. This reduces the human risk element, but it's not replacing the human being. And I think that's the most important takeaway. It should never replace the human being. It's a tool, just like Word, Excel, anything else. There can be easily things wrong in an Excel spreadsheet or any Word document, and we find them all the time. So,
anyway, blind acceptance is not going to work going forward.
No. And you have a policy, right? You have your marketing review policy. We put it through the tool. We get the results. A human being reviews it, accepts and rejects, and based on the current company standards, blah 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 blah, right? And you're good, right? And you guys got to do it. And you got to do it, and save all the work, of course. Save your work product. They want to see it.
Thanks. So let's while we're still on not on AI but on security, can we talk about Reg SP for a minute? And what are the deadlines? What's expected? What do firms have to do? There's some deadlines that have just passed or are coming up soon.
You want to go, Sander, or you want me to go?
No, you could take that one.
Yeah, it's not one of my favorite topics, but it's out there, right? Large firms over $1.5 billion, you better be out there done. Deadline was in December, so I sure hope you're done. Smaller firms, you got until June to get it redone. This is not one of my areas of strong expertise, I would argue, but look, you got to maintain your some sort of the same thing. You got to have an incident response plan, right? And you got to provide notifications to the clients on a timely basis, make sure that all happens. And it also has to do with your vendor risk and talking about your third-party due diligence, particularly those with sensitive customer data. For those of you that use fulfillment centers, right? Firm I used to be at, we had a fulfillment center, and we would send out 4.5 million statements a quarter. Yeah, and you had to be paying attention to that and be on top of them. The one thing I will say on that regard, right? You don't want to see a systematic breach of your cyber, right? But think about it from a Reg SP with regard to fulfillment centers. Invariably, those machines are stuffing envelopes. They're not 4.5 million is not being done by a human being, right? And invariably, every quarter we get 4, 5, 6, whatever that were sent to the wrong person. It says addressed to Todd, and I got Sander's statement. that's a problem, right? And for mutual funds, we reported that to the board. And I'll be honest, the first time they saw 8 breaches, the board almost had a heart attack. Holy cow, are you kidding me? 8? Well, give it in context, 8 out of 4.5 million. Okay, so now we have 99 point whatever it is, 89 making it up, percent accuracy. Okay, they were calmed down, but we had an instant response, and we went back to the vendor, and we made them sure that they reiterated to their clients and put in safety guards and whatever they could do beyond that. But yeah. So look, pay attention, people. This is something coming up. If you're a smaller firm and you've got Reg SP and you've got client data, make sure you've got a good policy. Certainly, things that our firms and other firms can help with, but you want to make sure that you meet your regulatory guidelines.
And one of the things I think everyone should have a full expectation of is when you get examined by a regulator and you get that first document request, they're going to ask for all of the changes in your policies and procedures to Reg SP, and you need to have them ready and have them looked at by, and approved by the firm, and have them ready to go. The time to start doing this is not after you know regulatory exam. Be prepared today for the exam coming tomorrow.
All right.
So I view all these things that we've talked about, quite frankly, as an open book test. All right. Everybody's got the test questions to the examination you're going to have at some point in time. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that, right? Let's focus on conflict of interest, right? Number one thing that people want to know, what are you doing about conflict of interest? And that's the easy stuff, personal trading, outside business activity, private securities, political contributions, OBAs, all that stuff. Most firms at this point in time have a system to handle that for them, but it takes care and feeding. That is not something that's a set it and forget it, okay? I think the other things that you need to be thinking about as part of this open book test is, what is your firm doing from an investment perspective, right? Obviously, fees. What are the fees on the funds? What are your fees? Making sure that they are appropriate for the client. I also think a lot about, especially in this market, liquidity, risks to the investment portfolios, sort of cost of exit, right? Sort of mixes in best execution. If you're not doing something for best execution, you might want to be thinking about it, right? And when I'm thinking about all this stuff, I am really thinking about, for certain the public securities. I mean, that's easy, right? And the next sort of down the line, if your firm is doing complex investments, ETFs with wrappers on that are less liquid, or anything that's less liquid, or something with higher costs, you really need to be understanding why your firm is doing this and have really good oversight that the client understands what they're getting. Alternative investments. I've seen there's a lot of them out there, a lot. Fees vary dramatically. Private credit, private funds, extended lockups, that's ripe for problems. And I'm seeing, if everybody else is reading the same articles I am, but private credit may be coming to a crunch, and making sure that you're talking to your investment professionals about what they're seeing and feeling, and making sure that we've thought about, have we told everybody what's going on here? A couple of specific things. If I were saying who I am as a client, and we had a bunch of different RIAs in here, individual retail clients, particularly older investors, right? Yeah, you need to be paying attention to them. Are they competent? for lack of a better word, right? Making sure that they really understand and that their objectives currently match what they were maybe when they became a client, and maybe 5 or 10 or even 20 years ago or more, right? I think a lot about firms that are growing and growing rapidly, particularly those that are entering new markets. If you've always been an RIA that's been in the retail space, that's fantastic, and you're doing great. Oh, by the way, now you're going to do some private funds. Private funds are a whole different animal, certainly for the compliance people, but also for the investment people. And what about newly registered? If you're going to start getting into the registered fund, and we have a client that, went on retail funds, mutual funds, institutional funds, that's fine. And then ETFs. Okay, well, that's a completely different animal, right? Make sure you understand, because these are things that are going to get you noticed at the SEC. Right? I think everybody here knows, but the SEC has a scale, right? A risk scale on all the firms, and things that are changing, you're growing rapidly, or you're shrinking rapidly, or people are coming, or people are going, or you're adding new product lineups. Those things are going to draw attention and raise your risk rating, and more likely than not, draw attention from the commission. And lastly, I'll just say, if you're relatively a new registrant out there, you got to count on it. If you're 3 years out and you haven't had an examination, I'm not going to say bet on it, but I wouldn't be betting against it. That's for sure. I wouldn't. Right. And, make sure you're doing a good job on your annual review. We see a lot of firms that may or may not do as good a job as they want or need to, I would argue. It's the time for compliance professionals to let management know what they're seeing and they're thinking. And this is one where I'll say it out loud a little bit. You kind of have to be a little bit brave and put it out there, what you see and what you feel. That is your job. The staff feels, I'm not going to say it's right or wrong, but they feel, I think at times, that they have deputized the CCO. Take that for what it's worth. But if you see something that you think is got a material risk to the firm, I would make sure that your senior management is well aware of it.
And Todd, I get asked the question all the time, what keeps me up at night? And to sort of piggyback on what you said, there's been a migration over the last decade or so about the concentration of alternative investments in client accounts. And you used to see asset allocations for alternatives, 2%, 3%. We're seeing as high as, 15 or 20% in some model portfolios. And I'm very, very concerned that the due diligence, the pricing, the illiquidity, the placement of high-risk securities and people whose investment objectives are considerably lower than high risk, those things, that evolution over the last 10 years into the alternative space, I completely understand why it's happened, but I think firms really need to pay attention to it and understand that's a regulatory focus. When the SEC is going to come in and do an exam of your small RIA, and they see that your model portfolios contain a significant amount of alternatives, they will focus in that area. So,
and I think for all the reasons you're right, Sander, for all the reasons we talked about, particularly liquidity, particularly risk, and I always fall back to disclosure, because the Advisors Act, again, is a disclosure document, right? So I think about all those things, and I think about also, when you mention it, and I keep thinking back to how people are aging, right? Every day we all get a little older, right? And making sure that what was true 3 years ago is still true today. And one of the first, we had a hard rule that we had to review all the accounts with clients on an annual basis. And we had a lot of clients. It was good, and wasn't something I had to put into place. It was already there, which was good, but I strongly endorsed it for sure, right? And all those things that we've talked about all sort of demonstrate that you have a reasonably designed compliance program. And I'm going to quote the statute: to prevent and detect violations of federal securities laws. Right? That's the quote. That's what we are supposed to do: prevent and detect. Okay.
And document. And document.
Well, yeah, you got to document, right? If it's not documented, it didn't happen. So yeah, 100%. And the devil is in the documentation for sure.
We're gonna keep talking for a couple more minutes here, but while we finish up talking about the questions that we had to discuss, we'd like to invite anyone who has a question to submit it. Once again, that's that icon you'll see with a box with a question mark in it. So just put your questions in there, and we'll be moving on to audience questions in just a few minutes. So Todd and Sander, would you like to talk a little bit more about Reg BI and fiduciary standards, or is there something else that you really feel like?
No, I think that's a lot that's been talked about a lot, not just here, but I do want to talk about technology, right? And I'm actually really happy to say this, but I think over the last 5-6 years, we've seen an influx of talent in the fintech space that is interested in compliance. And I think about some of the things that have been done through the marketing material, some of the enhancements on the email surveillance and those kinds of things. But there are a number of firms that are doing some very interesting work that can make compliance professionals better. Not a replacement, but make your job easier to get all this done. This is a huge, huge job. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But you need to have the right balance of technology and people. Adding more people is not a solution. It actually increases your risk. And I've said this very publicly. All right. So it needs to be the right level of people with the right tools. Okay. If you are only using Excel and Word, maybe a conflict of interest solution, and an email surveillance system, you're going to get lapped. Okay. You're not going to be able to keep up. So we're happy to talk to you about what that looks like in more depth, given individual firms. But there's a world out there that can really, really be useful so that you can manage your life and not worry every night. Okay. So, we're coming at 45 after the hour, but if I leave one thing with you from everything that the SEC has said, we have a big job. We do. And there's a lot of priorities and a lot of conflicting priorities. But the only way to, in my mind, how to tell you to help you manage your life and manage your career here is to really embrace the technology. I will tell you that every single place that I have been, my best friends within the organization are the IT people. You need to know them, and they can help you. They may not know the right fintech. We can help there for sure. Right? That's not hard. But really be mindful of that. Sometimes the hardest thing as a compliance person, my perspective at least, is to pick your head up and look around, see what's going on in the world. We're so busy doing. We got this, we got this deadline, we got this deadline. Sometimes you need to take your head up out of the paperwork and look around and see How can we do this better, maybe cheaper, but faster?
Yeah, if I could jump in just for a minute on what I see from the broker-dealer side, FINRA and their 2026 priorities, again, but more extensively, emphasize elder fraud, elder exploitation as being a real problem in the industry. And I can tell you, because I'm chin deep in this issue these days, this is an epidemic, and our population is aging, and the people who take advantage of an aging population are growing, and firms are being held responsible for not putting in steps to protect their clients. And we can talk about trusted contacts and all those other things, but if you leave here with one thing, work on your policies and procedures and your training on helping your staff and your client-facing people recognize the red flags for elder abuse and elder exploitation, and put together a process and educated people to help these clients from being, taken advantage of by, people all over the world. I mean, I see people from the Philippines, Thailand, Laos. I mean, even I get 15, spam calls a day from all types of companies. When you have diminished capacity or you get older, you're more susceptible to this kind of abuse and this kind of exploitation. Make sure your firm is prepared and trained to address it, because it's only getting worse.
Okay. I'm going to just throw in one thing on top of that, Sander. I agree with what you said. I am not a fan of training. I'm a fan of educating, right? I think of training my dog. If I do this, if they do this, I'm going to do this. If you do this, I'm going to do this. No. What I really want people is to issue spot. If they know enough to spot an issue and raise it to management and to compliance, then we have an effective compliance program. So I'm going to teach you what to do, what to look for, but I'm also going to teach you why. That's the important part, to understand the context. I think that firms don't take training, and again, I don't like that word, I'll say education, seriously enough. As part of a risk assessment that we've built out, one of the things that we measure actually is not only the policy, but how well was it educated to the staff.
It's a great point. And I'd add one more element: who to escalate the issue to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right.
And that comes from being a friend of compliance and making sure that you're doing your management by walking around and talking to people every day. It's a regular cadence. I'll say one last thing, and I will stop, I promise. I will assert that any of the firms that Sander and I have worked for, that no one has ever picked up the phone and called the chief compliance officer. They won't. They absolutely will not do that. That is extremely intimidating. No less so than if you're going to call the CEO. You don't know them. This is why management by walking around, developing relationships. This is our relationship business, both internally and externally. Your staff needs to know you. And I don't mean just like your first name. They need to know you. Why? They need to understand and appreciate that they can feel comfortable in broaching a hard subject potentially to discuss, and that you are going to react appropriately and professionally.
Right.
Okay. This is how we do our job and do all of these priorities and how to prepare for all this stuff. If you get one thing out of all this, this is a partnership with all of your business colleagues. You have a title that says compliance, but it's a firm responsibility. It is not one person's responsibility. Know your internal clients. There you go.
Nice.
We have no questions, Julius? None?
Well,
stunned silence.
One more
silence.
Yes, please get in your questions. And also one more thing for that Q&A field. If you have topics that you would like, maybe we can't answer the question today. It's too particular, but you'd like Todd and Sander to see that question, or you have a topic maybe for a future event that you'd like to see Todd and Sander talk about at some future event, or topics that you want addressed, then please do put those in that field. And we have one question here, and then we'll wrap it up after that. So, what is your take on on anti-money laundering and what the SEC is going to do about that this year?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear about what.
Well, AML, anti-money laundering. What is your take on what is the SEC going to do with regards to anti-money laundering this year?
For advisors, it's not supposed to be in effect till mid-28, if I recall.
Okay.
No, I'll say not for publication. I don't think it will go through. I don't.
No.
I think this is a solution in search of a problem. Because all the money is held at the banks, or it's held at the broker dealers, which are already subject to all this stuff, and even mutual funds. It's already been through the process. As long as advisors don't directly hold custody, by physical custody, which is almost physically impossible in today's world. So I will be stunned, because I'm not really sure what I would do at this point in time that's not already been done. So I'm not a fan, and Senator and I have talked about this for quite a bit, and I'm taking a wait and see attitude, because I'm not going to put any resources on this one for today.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it'll end up being a fairly low priority issue compared to everything else that's going on.
If we saw big abuses of this, sure, I get it then, right? If we found a whole bunch of terrorists who had all kinds of money that was being managed by an RIA directly, and not going through a bank and not going through a broker dealer, how do you do that? But okay, you literally can't buy anything that way that I can see. If someone figure out a way to do it, yeah, I can see that happening. I just can't come up with a scenario that's viable.
And if I can, real quick, just while we're waiting on any other question, I wanted to piggyback what Todd was saying earlier. When he was talking about general culture compliance. As a compliance officer, your biggest advocates are your other C-suite members. Make sure that they understand you're their partner. Let them champion you to the people that they work with. I always said, my job is to help run a business in a particular role, but I'm also marketing. I'm also doing operations. Everybody in the C-suite, part of their responsibility is compliance and supervision. Yep. They can be your biggest champion, right? You're going to have a much better organization if everyone champions everyone than if the marketing person goes, well, I'm just marketing and my eyes are blind to, I walked into an office and I saw this weird stuff going on, but that's not my area. It's everybody's job. And build those relationships internally, so people understand you're not the gotcha police. You're there because you're helping build a profitable business, and we all benefit when the business is profitable. And sometimes you achieve profitability by lessening risk rather than growing revenue. You can do both.
Yeah.
We're at it. Okay.
One question, Sandra, I'll ask you. Notable change between the SEC relationship with FINRA?
Not that I've seen that impacts the industry. I think, we haven't had a full slate of SEC commissioners, and I don't know how long, and that position is getting in, it's always been political, but if you look at the backgrounds of the SEC commissioners, they're not industry people. They're political appointees from other areas. And I don't really see, other than the occasional political agenda based upon the current administration, that has trickled down to FINRA and any of the enforcement or anything else they've done with broker dealers. Not to say it isn't going to change in this political environment. A lot of things appear to be changing pretty quickly. Yeah. But as of today, I don't see the relationship any differences in the relationship between the SEC and FINRA impacting the industry.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, just a reminder that for you guys, for all the attendees, to think about anything that you might want to hear Sander and Todd address in the future. As we close here, and want to thank everybody for attending. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us. We would like to say we're going to end with a page that sets out contact information for Todd and Sander, so you can follow up with them later if you happen to think of something, you have questions, or just want to chat about the things you've heard about here today. So with that, we'd like to thank everyone for attending, and have a great week.
Thanks, everybody.
And I'll be at FSI next week in case anyone wants to say hello.
There you go. Very good.
Thank you, everyone.